Welcome. Don't adjust your dial. Oh, yes, we got the volume turned up today. I'm burning midnight oil. It's midterms week. So here we are for another 1-year anniversary episode of the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. And today, or tonight for me, tomorrow for you, we're going to talk about a progression that we've been working up to for a while. It's simply called connecting the dots. For those who are outside looking in on us, it may appear we talk about some pretty random global news stories on our humble little podcast. That we're just recording the events of the day and then doing the same thing the next day and the next day and simply being another media outlet. Well, those individuals would be wrong, because in order to do what we're about to do, we all need to build up our knowledge, our data of what's going on in the world today. You see, history looks and records events and tries to explain them after the fact. This explanation can help inform our present so we can better understand where we are today. Media companies, they record the facts of the day to inform citizens and governments about relevant things happening. Those facts then become history, and rewind, repeat, it's a cycle, you get it. But the idea of Lofi Poli Sci is about what's going on in the world today, so we can start doing our real poli-sci work. You see, political science uses everything I just mentioned: history, media reports, research, and in political science we use those tools and more to find trends, to form theories, create hypotheses, test them, and see if we're right, and do it all again. And what are these hypotheses we test? Lo-Fi Nation, it's predicting what's going to be going on in the world tomorrow. That's what we do. Our hypotheses, and in Lofi Poli Sci's case and my own in comparative global politics, our hypotheses guide us to analyze very specific situations around the world, look at the significant factors that influence outcomes, and we provide predictions on what's going to happen next. But that only works if you currently know what's going on in the world today. It only works if you can put those random dots together around the world and see the pattern, the trends, and inevitably the outcomes. In short, it takes time to build up the data, the dots. For us, let's say it's taken about 235 episodes and more than 1,000 global news stories for you to begin to have that perspective on where the dots are, how they're connected, and what are the likely outcomes in the future. So to do this, I'm going to pull 3 stories from the last year's episodes, in episode 1 and episode 3. I'll update them, then I'll connect them, and then project and predict. So from episode 1, March 18, 2020, the headline: A Snapshot of Mexico's Cartel Landscape Amid Rising Violence. Okay, so sadly, no surprise to anyone, cartel violence is still a major problem in Mexico a year later. However, Mexico's lower house of their national legislature just passed a bill that will make the recreational use of marijuana legal. And it's highly likely the upper house will also pass it, and the president will sign it, and Mexico will become one of the major players in the world, as far as a country, to have legalized weed for recreational use. Now, before I go any further, understand we're doing Lofi Poli Sci here in projections. We are not talking about ideologies, rights or wrongs, ethics or morals. All of that goes out the window in our projections. We are only talking about the likelihood of events taking place. No matter if you think they're good or bad, that doesn't matter here. We're talking about events that are likely to happen. That's it. So marijuana looks likely to become legal for recreational use in Mexico. Got it. Now, of course, cartels deal in a whole lot more than just weed. They deal in meth, cocaine, heroin, guns, and tragically even human beings. The point is, legalizing one drug isn't going to end the violence there. Yet. But the president also said the government was doing research into heroin, signaling, potentially, that could be next. We'll have to wait and see. Regardless, this is going to be a major new legal cash crop for the government in many ways, and I'm not going to go into all of them right now. And it will also be a major hit to the revenue of the cartels. The balance of power could begin to shift, especially if you add legalizing heroin to the list of potential future outcomes. Now, one of the major issues about the war with the government and the cartels is that the cartels are far better funded. But that begins to change. The balance in the war changes as well. Mexico, if they start to clean up their government, their economy, and the cartel issue, they skyrocket in their position as a global player linking North America and the rest of Latin America, which, if you didn't know, they already are a major player. In 2020, the IMF, International Monetary Fund, reported Mexico with the 16th highest GDP of all countries in the world. Real talk now. Lofi Poli Sci, this news story from a year ago, we're talking about nothing less than the central influencer of both American continents shifting south of the US border. Now wait, that's just one dot. We're connecting three today. Our next dot, also from episode 1, March 18, 2020. Putin orders Russian constitutional vote despite virus fears. So this was a constitutional amendment that would allow President Putin of Russia to serve for 2 more consecutive terms as president. And this shit passed, of course it did. Putin has been in power as either prime minister or president of Russia since 1999. And he's on track to continue doing so until 2032. When he came to power in 1999, Russia was in complete economic shambles from the collapse of the Soviet Union. But that has changed drastically. And it's changed because of Putin. I'm not going into all the details because those are some old dots that don't matter as much on individual level as much as the trend of what those dots tell us. You see, people tend to think, at least in the United States and in other Western democracies, that democracy and capitalism are the best form for a country's economy to really prosper. Sure, let them go with that. Us, we don't buy it for a second. And you see, Putin doesn't buy it for a second either. Putin and Russia have an economic advantage over democracies that have free and fair elections and political parties that change power. He's been able to implement what amounts to his own vision of economic success in Russia in a long-term economic plan. He's been in power for almost 22 years and has another 10. He can play the long game when it comes to playing the world economy. Oh, and P.S., the IMF in 2020 ranked Russia as having the 11th highest GDP of all countries in the world. And it's growing. And so long as Putin stays in power, which this news story we covered lets him do so, Russia's economy is going to keep growing. The 1990s are over, and Russia is an international economic giant again. And Western and Eastern Europe are dependent on Russia for a lot of things. Not going into them right now, but they are. Russia's influence is great over the entire globe. But still, we have one more dot to connect. From episode 3, March 20, 2020. North Korea fires 2 projectiles into the sea. All right, so everyone knows North Korean relations been going back and forth these past few years. Nothing new, of course. However, there are new things going on. And there are signals that North Korea may be ready to talk. Mostly because they just released some strong propaganda-like message. And that one dot doesn't mean much individually. But combined with other similar dots over time from them, these strong messages usually mark a time when they are ready for talks with other countries, but want to begin those talks from a position of power. You dig? Remember connecting dots here, not focusing too strongly on any one dot, because then they all look random, of course. So sooner or later, someone is going to be successful with talks with North Korea. This is happening. China and Russia both already have numerous economic dealings with North Korea, which is, of course, again, United Nations. It's against United Nations sanctions, which China and Russia both sit on the UN Security Council, but it doesn't matter. I mean, how do you think North Korea has survived so long with massive international sanctions on them? It's because someone else is breaking those sanctions and trading with them. For example, China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, a host of other countries. We're not getting into it today. The point, sooner or later, and I think it's very much sooner rather than later, the sanctions will end. And an agreement will be made. and economic relief will flood into North Korea. Trade will open up. Military spending in the country will decrease. That spending will be reallocated into other sectors of the economy. In short, North Korea, they're going to hit the international stage running and become a major player in the international economy and in global politics as a nuclear power. Now, we don't have IMF data on North Korea's GDP, and even if we did, it wouldn't be reliable. But having them jump on the scene, I'd wager they'd end up being a top 20 GDP country within 1 or 2 decades. And yes, I'm serious. That fast. All right, enough of the stories and the updates. Let's connect these random dots, shall we? From Mexico, Russia, and North Korea. What do the trends and data tell us when we do connect our dots? That in all 3 of our stories from a year ago, and the updates, there are strong indications that these 3 countries are gaining, going to gain, and continue to gain in economic and political might around the world. Russia and North Korea's partnership will strengthen and reinforce each other. Throw China into the mix as a trading partner, they dominate trade in the East and hold a huge sway over Europe as far as future trade goes, shifting the dynamics of the very international system we exist in. Mexico, for its part, will do the same thing, but in Central and South America, locking the trade area down as the new preferred trading partner of all Latin America and the Caribbean. All 3 of these stories and the countries connected, which seem random, all point in one direction. These 3 countries' share of the global economy will increase, and sooner rather than later, they will together dominate the global market along with other players like China, which we already are starting to see. And the implications, the United States being number 1 GDP/largest economy in the world, those days are numbered. And for more reasons than those named here, but these 3 are just speeding it along a lot. And the post-World War II balance of powers being in favor of Western democracies has already begun shifting. And all the data and dots indicate that shift is going to continue and happen in a very particular way with very particular countries quite soon. All of that from connecting those 3 stories, those 3 dots. Now, in reality, we also made what looks like, from the outside, a few leaps of faith and some assumptions. But they weren't. They were simply other dots that we already know, but we just didn't mention. I can't throw all the dots on the table at you at once. This is just an exhibition of what we're about to do. And all of this, my friends, is the difference between reporting and Lofi Poli Sci. From here on out, we start connecting these dots a whole lot more to make sure you see nothing in the world is random, and to make sure you see not only what's going on in the world today, but what's going to go on in the world tomorrow. And check us out tomorrow for the 1-year anniversary episode. No news coverage or connecting the dots. Tomorrow, it's a conversation about us expanding our platform. Always remember that Lofi Poli Sci is more than just me. It's the we that we be. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, wash those hands, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. Pickering, signing off.